City Commission special session to order for Tuesday, March 12th, 2019. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So under general business, we have 19-184, purchase and sale agreement for tax lots, blah, blah, and blah, blah. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commission. So tonight we have before us a request for the City Commission to authorize a purchase and sales agreement for 2 tax lots along Claremont Avenue. The tax lots are a 1.97 acres and 0.56 acres zoned R2 along Claremont Way. It is encumbered by a PGE system going through the property. But it has been identified because of that transmission line as a trail connectivity for our Parks and Recreation Master Plan and our Oregon City Trails Master Plan. So we're asking the City Commission to authorize the City Manager to sign off on the purchase and sales agreement for the combined properties. We had a conversation with the property owner, and they're comfortable with a purchase price of $150,000. We did have the property valued at $170,000 through the property was donated to the current owner, the Portland State University, and so it's about $20,000 less than the current assessed value of the property. So with that, I will open up to any questions and conversation.
So this belongs to PSU?
PSU Foundation, so I'm assuming it was gifted to them as a write-off.
Okay. Questions?
I have one. It's a general question about real estate transactions. Why do we use realtors when we have an attorney that can do that for us and he's already on retainer?
We do have
not this one so much, but we've done some major transactions that the commissions would be a lot. Do we want to continue doing that?
I think it depends on what the situation is. We usually utilize the real estate professional because we want to go in anonymously, especially with property transactions, so that once they know it's a local government, the negotiations are a little bit more difficult.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's really the main reason why we use them, is because we're able to make those contacts without disclosing.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thanks.
Question. What are next steps after this purchase if we want to start using it hypothetically in the future? We'd still have to work out an agreement with PGE, correct?
Depends on what we want to use it for. So we do have calls out to PGE to get a base point for what they'd be comfortable with in the easement area. But yes, we would, if we were going to install anything that was permanent in nature, we would need to have a conversation with PGE. I will say in the same corridor, if you go further down along Claremont, it goes through parking lots at Fred Meyer. If you go further back along the easement area, it's Wesleyan Park has parking lots and trails and things that are underneath the power line, so we don't envision that'll be an issue.
Yeah, as part of a continuous trail, it doesn't thrill me because I know what the surrounding areas are, but I look at the other uses it could be put to, and this is actually a good use for it. Even if we put in a walking trail around it, similar to Chapin Park or whatever we choose to do, I mean, the alternative is what that could become. I think it's a good move, and in terms of the amount of money that we're going to spend, it's actually small compared to most of our transactions. So I've got no issues with it.
Well, I think given where it's at and the condition it's at right now, so it's basically pretty flat. And people have been clamoring for a fenced dog park for a while now, and this is really kind of away from neighborhoods on both sides. This might be a good spot to maybe experiment with something like that.
And there's some elderly that live close by too. If they have sidewalks that can make their way to it, that would be nice. But we'll deal with that when the time comes.
Okay, is there a Motion?
I'll motion to approve 19-184 purchase and sale agreement for tax lots 32E08AB-00300 and 3-2E-08AB-00200. That would be the blah blah. that
Yeah, there you go.
the mayor
Second.
recommended.
Motion second, further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Since we're not going into a regular city commission meeting, is there any necessity for us to wait until 6:15 to start the work session?
Is that what it's advertised for? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, then we will adjourn until 6:15. Tuesday, 2019, it is 6:15 PM. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
And Mayor Holliday.
Here. 19-178, Buena Vista House update. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Buena Vista House. This has been an item that the Commission has discussed a number of times over the last few years. Most recently, discussion has occurred in relationship to our deferred maintenance list for the city as a whole. So the Buena Vista House is one of those items on our deferred maintenance list that has not received the appropriate amount of funding for maintenance in the long term. A couple of years ago, the property was red tagged and we have not used it since 2013. So a little overview on the Buena Vista House. It's located in the McLaughlin neighborhood at Atkinson Park. It sits on the corner of Jefferson and 16th. I'm sorry, Jackson and 16th. Buena Vista House is a little over 1,000 square feet, community meeting space. It has a main meeting room, small kitchen space, and a single-use restroom. A little bit on the history of the Buena Vista House. In 1923, the Buena Vista Civic Club was formed. In 1930, they moved the structure that currently sits there from approximately 7th and Center Street, so in our parking lot here at City Hall, to its current location. There is conflicting information whether it was one structure or two structures put together. There is an obvious seam in the building where either it was split in two for the move and then reconstructed, or was physically two houses reconstructed once it was on site. The Buena Vista Civic Club operated the house for a number of years, and in 1987, due to declining enrollment in their group and their inability to maintain the clubhouse, they turned over all ownership and property rights for the structure to the city. Sat in Atkinson Park and thought that the city could use it as a public meeting space. The city did use it as a public meeting space for a number of years. Had primarily rentals, but ongoing uses for scout troops, AA meetings, birthday parties, family reunions, those types of things. In 2013, the structure was declared a dangerous building by the building official and closed to the public. Shortly after that time, electricity was disconnected from the structure, and the city has since spent very minimal amounts on the maintenance needs at the Buena Vista House. In 2018, we had a group of engaged stakeholders that came to us, well before 2018, but in 2018 we engaged a public engagement process of bringing in a facilitator, meeting with all of the stakeholders, going through the needs of the group, what they felt the house should be, and trying to come up with a process for what it would take to get the house open and usable again for the community as a community meeting room. A couple of photos. So first picture, circa 1930, around the time when the clubhouse was moved and opened up. And then the second one is circa 1970. It was in a scrapbook and was in a grouping of photos that was around the 50th anniversary of the group. So Buena Vista House, as I said, we have used as a public meeting space and opened it up for reservations to the community. The most recent date that we have, 2013, we had just under $3,500 in revenue and 28 reservations for the house. You can see reservations and the revenues fluctuated, but never been a big moneymaker for the city. We did see the number of reservations decline as well over the years that we have available for data. So one of the things that we discussed as a group of stakeholders in the city was that we needed to know what we were in for if we were going to reopen it as a public meeting space. So we engaged city staff and the stakeholder group to look at, you know, what the options were. The building official wrote a letter for staff that kind of laid out what would be required for the house to be habitable again for the public. We used that letter as a base point and reached out to a couple of construction firms to see, using the letter, walking through the house, what they thought an approximate estimation of costs would be in order to bring the house up to a usable condition for a public meeting space. The numbers that came back on cost estimates were in the 800s to roughly $1 million range. The stakeholder group thought that type of work would not be required, and that a lesser scope of work may be a usable solution. So working with Todd Island, who is a registered architect, he developed a scope of work that we were able to then send out to local firms to see if they could give cost estimates. Cost estimates that came back were just over $100,000 to just under $500,000. Some of the cost estimates on the lower end didn't seem to be complete in their numbers. So I would guess we would probably be, again, looking at somewhere in the 500,000 to $1 million range if we were looking to bring the house up to a public meeting space and habitable for public meetings. As part of the process, as we discussed earlier, the electricity for the Buena Vista House was disconnected shortly after it was condemned. And the stakeholder group has asked that we reconnect power to the house so that it can receive minimal heat in order to lessen the degradation from weather and temperature fluctuations. So the request is to install a 20 amp service, meter and panel.
200 amp service.
I'm sorry, did I say 200 amp service? 2 8-foot baseboard heaters, motion lights on the exterior of the house for security needs. They're anticipating the expense to be roughly $5,000, of which they have privately funded. The Oregon City Parks Foundation and the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association are partnering to try to raise those funds. It's my understanding that the Park Foundation has offered a partial loan and partial grant to the stakeholder group in order to facilitate that work. So staff at this time, and communication that we've given to the stakeholder group, is that we did not feel comfortable, given the rather large deferred maintenance backlog for the system as a whole, to start to invest in this property, knowing that it would be a substantial investment, whether it's $200,000 or $1 million, that would be a conversation that the commission would need to have as we're starting to invest time and energy and even funds, even though they are privately raised. It would be irresponsible of us to invest those funds without knowing what our long-term vision for the house would be as a city. And so I wanted to initiate that conversation with the commission, given the information that we have, whether or not you are comfortable with reconnecting power at this time, whether you're comfortable with the plans of the stakeholder group, and whether or not we should continue to invest staff time and possible city resources into this house. There would be some minimal expenses for once we do connect the power. The city would be responsible for maintaining the electricity at the site. They are estimating that it'll be around $40 a month for minimal heat at the building. I'm sure it could be a little bit more given the insulation factor and construction methodology of that building, but there would be some resources that would need to be allocated. So with that, I will answer any questions if you have them and open it up to conversation.
Commissioner Locksmith?
Sure, so thank you. I have a couple of questions. Can you expand on that third bullet you have up there about dedicating staff, dedicated resources to the project?
Yeah, so we obviously would need to dedicate at least funding for the electric bill for the house, which we currently don't have budgeted in the city budget. Additionally, staff time to work with the stakeholder group to identify any other funding mechanisms. They're anticipating going after grant opportunities. Oftentimes there is matching grants or matching funds that are required for grants. There is some staff time that would be dedicated to this project, just working with the stakeholder group, reviewing their scope of work, meeting contractors on site, and those types of things. That some of them are expenses, direct expenses, some of them are lost opportunity via staff time dedicated to this project that might not be able to be dedicated to other projects.
Okay. And then my second question is on your earlier slide with the cost estimates. You have two bullets with two different sets of cost estimates. Can you explain for us and the public what are the primary differences between the $800 to $1 million cost estimate and the very significantly different $100 to $480,000?
So the original cost estimates that were received were based off of a letter that was written by the city's building official stating the requirements of the city in order to open the house for public use. Because it was red tagged, it needs to be approved by the building official in order to reopen it again. So we took that letter and we had responsible firms walk through the space. We gave them nothing more than the letter and their experience in the construction industry, looking at what would be required, and they came back with a couple different estimates. The secondary the second bullet point, the 105 to 488 stakeholder scope of work is what Todd Island, as a architect by trade, went through and put together a scope of work for what it would be required based off of the letter that the building official wrote, and refined that scope to include a little bit more specific requests for the construction firms when they came in, so they were doing just specific items. So as an example, based on the condition of the house, on the initial cost estimates, they might have came in and said that they thought the floors should be refinished as a public meeting space. That was not specifically called out in the scope of work on Mr. Island's scope of work. Additionally, they may have felt that a full foundation would be required for the house. Mr. Island's scope of work did not call for a full foundation, but support piers and corner foundations on the house. So there's it's a little bit more specific call out that he had in his scope.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I feel, if you'd back up one slide, Bill. Not that one, the one that talked about, forget it, I'll just do it without it. There's three questions you posed, 3 bullet points.
Yes.
I think we're talking about two very different considerations tonight. The first is a request to reconnect power to the Buena Vista House, which appears to be privately funded. And potentially even the ongoing cost of heating it could be privately funded. So I think that's one consideration and should be a standalone consideration, especially if they're not asking for any monies from the city. My considerations are that when a historical piece is gone, it's gone. But in this case, they're not asking the city to put in the money. The long-term vision of the Buena Vista House, I struggle with those estimates. I hope in the future, for comparison, there's some kind of form that everybody uses that we can do line item to line item. Because I've read a lot of quotes in my life and I can't compare.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they mean. Whereas if we had a standardized form and this guy says concrete foundation, this guy says concrete foundation, I would get it. So we're not being asked to decide that tonight, I don't think. And that's a very different value proposition than the first one, which is a private group wants to fund a preservation to at least allow that to survive while they continue ongoing fundraising efforts. So in the first one, the private group financing it, and as far as I'm concerned, they can pay the power bill too, because I'm not comfortable with the rate, knowing how that building is built. But regardless, the first consideration is very limited in scope, funded privately, and they're asking for the opportunity to take action to save this house. I'm not gonna get in the way of those people. If they wanna do that, that's fine by me. The long-term discussion about where's it gonna go and how's it gonna finance it, let's see how successful they are and where it wants to go. The long-term considerations are a very different thought process for me. Valuing history, understanding that architecturally it has no value, but culturally, in terms of what it meant to the community, it does have value. Those are different considerations entirely. And I know they are SDCs, and I understand the limit on how SDCs can be used. But I do look at other areas of this city, like Park Place, that could be served with some investment too. So I'd like to break it down into two discussions tonight. One, the short term, you want to heat it, you want to preserve it to allow yourself the opportunity to potentially save it. I won't get in the way of that. The second one, I can't even deal with that because the quality of the estimates doesn't give me what I need to make decisions. I'll leave my statements at that for now.
Commissioner Smith?
How did you know I wanted to talk about this? It looks like I have another house to save. We're gonna do it. I don't know if the commission will support it, but we're gonna save another house. And one of the things that I appreciate is having people in the audience that you can just look in the audience and know who's here tonight for this issue. They care about parks and they care about the history of this town. And it takes one or two people or a group of people every few decades to do their job to make sure that we save these buildings. And in 1987, it was the city attorney. In 1986, the costs were researched with regard to either the demolition or building relocation. Estimated demolition ranged from $1,450 to $3,800. The demolition ranges are always used as a way to try to say, well, it's going to cost, too much to fix it, so we'll just bulldoze it. But again, that costs money too. So you're spending money to demolish, a building that's going to be gone forever. And the city attorney advised that the city is legally responsible for the maintenance and upkeep and the insurance, and that the structure is well maintained, provides potential meeting space for a variety of the community and civic groups, and has a long, rich history. It should be maintained for continued use. And then when I was on the commission, which would have been the next time this came up, which, I'm sure it came up before that. I have a letter here from February 2016 that was actually a letter to the mayor asking that the building be saved because it was on the agenda for demolition. And staff at the time said, well, it has no historic value. And I heard that the night of that meeting, and so I went to the museum, and within an hour, got the history that I could find of the building. And then magically, a week later, I got a packet from the city parks director saying, oh yeah, here's all this stuff that clearly showed it had historic value. So when we just easily say that it has no historic value, or we come up with grandiose price tags of what it takes to fix it, it's very easy to let it go unnoticed. But once the people know that it has a history, and once they know that we've definitely saved it this long, and once we get a letter from from SHPO saying that it actually is eligible for National Register, then we start having a problem. And so I appreciate the citizens that are kind of looking at this and researching it, and asking the city to not save it just yet and not demolish it just yet, but just hook up the power, which is the absolute minimum we should be doing to make sure that that building is not neglected longer. We have quite a reputation of not taking care of our buildings, especially historic buildings. This one, of course, is not designated, but maybe it should be. And I hope maybe this group will work towards that. Because that was the technicality that saved the Ermitinger House. Because the city couldn't say that it's not historic because it was on the National Register, and the city is obligated to fix buildings that are on the register. So it's just a lot easier to demolish it when it's not. So anyway, that's enough on that. I will continue to support this. I think we should have a conversation of what the future of this building should be. Because right now, the only thing that I would say is the future of the building, that it's at least still standing there and it stays there. And if just all we can do now is keep it from degrading more, then that's a good thing. I remember probably I'll go into a little detail here because some members of this group asked me, well, what did it take to save the Ermitinger House? And what it took was 20 years of yelling at the city. Honest to God, that's what it took. I remember making phone calls as a citizen for 2 years straight that the windows were falling out of the house and that the Parks Department needed to go put tarps over the windows and they wouldn't do it. I wrote letters, I did whatever I could, just as the same as some of these people are doing. So it's a lot of work. But in the end, we have the historic character of the city intact and should be proud of ourselves for doing the work to save these important buildings. So I say we should at least let the group do the work that they want to do and bless that, and then maybe have a dialogue in the near future. I don't want this to delay anymore because the longer we put it off, it's just easier to forget about it. But the last time we talked about it, it's been 2 or 3 years already, and we just let the building sit there. Without addressing it in some way, it's easy for us to say, well, there is no long-term vision. Well, let's make one. So instead of saying we're going to wait, hook the electricity up and talk about the long-term vision 2 years ago, let's talk about it now. Not tonight, but soon, and see if what this group is visions for it, what the Parks Foundation visions for it, and if it's something that we feel is worth saving.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. What's the occupancy of the building?
Officially 65.
65.
That would be at the time.
And is the city short on public meeting space? Maybe Tony could better answer that question.
I guess it depends. I mean, we have facilities. Do they, the library is heavily used with the facilities there. Neighborhood associations are using other facilities, churches, other facilities have become available. It's in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. Is it good to have, more meeting spaces available in each of the neighborhoods? Potentially.
So, could I interject something?
Sure.
I don't think this is about meeting space. This is about this historical building. I mean, if it was about meeting space for what this is gonna cost, we could knock it down and build themselves a small modern building. It's not about meeting space.
I get your point, Commissioner.
Okay.
Let me make my point. My point is that we currently have better than, it's better than $15 million in deferred maintenance for parks.
27.4.
27 point, okay. And, for good or for bad, the last number of city commissions, including, 8 years that Commissioner Smith was on the commission, did nothing for this building. Now, I'm not gonna oppose letting power come back in, but I'm gonna follow on Commissioner O'Donnell said, that not only does the private group pay for the installation of the power, but they pay the power bill. Then moving on from that, it's difficult for me to justify spending even $100,000 on a building that while it has some significant historical value, most of that can be documented without retaining the building. There is not an exigent need for more meeting space. We're building meeting space at both Public Works, I think, aren't we? And at the new police court facility. So the question becomes, it's not about history versus not history. It's about being careful with the dollars that we have. And the question is, does the $100,000 to $500,000 that we would have to spend to fix this house override the other needs that we have in our park system? And in my mind, it doesn't. But if this group is, and I've said publicly, maybe not in a meeting, but to other people, that if this group wants to take the house and move it to another lot and fund the reconstruction of it in a private setting, I'm more than happy to do that. Sell it to them for $1 and they can move it to another lot and they can, do their thing. But I cannot justify spending that kind of money in public dollars when we have the deficits that we have in the rest of the park system. Commissioner Smith?
To clarify, I was on the commission starting 2009, when the building was still being used, still being maintained, and still being used for meeting space. And so to say that the last several commissions didn't do anything, here's what we didn't do: we didn't bulldoze it.
And
So as long as it's still-
no one is suggesting we bulldoze it now.
Okay, you were in the past, I'm just saying.
And just to clarify, you were also on the commission when it was closed and stopped being maintained.
That's right. That's a
Commissioner
staff problem.
Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think most of us are in agreement about the power, and the agreeing to have the stakeholder group fund that piece of the project. My question on it, what I think that we need to talk about and kind of try to pin down is the timeline. Is there some timeline in which we want to say, okay, let's do this, but let's give you a deadline to circle back, or that we work on it, or that we make some progress on it, because it is going to play into our parks decision, and the deferred maintenance and what do we do? I mean, $1 million is no chump change. We can do a lot with $1 million in a lot of parks. We can improve Atkinson Park, really nice improvements for a lot less than $1 million. So it's a big conversation to have. But is there any way we can put, I don't know what would be reasonable, but some type of time constraint, some goal that we say, okay, let's turn on the power, you guys work on this, but come back to us, or let's, I don't want this to turn into some long-term, for 5 years the power's on, but we don't actually ever progress on anything and we're spending staff time on it.
So I have one more point to make, and that is that when we turn the power on, then does that become an attractive nuisance? We obviously know that we have a homeless issue in Oregon City like everyone else has. The house is in a remote section of the city. We've had issues with homeless folks there before. So if we do that, then one, I assume we're still continuing to insure that place at some level.
Yes.
If we turn the power back on, does that necessitate a change in the insurance? I think we need to
We
have
have to-
that
we'd have to
question
have a question,
answered. Because, you know, if it's gonna change the insurance dollars that we're spending more, then I would want that group to be paying for those costs as well. And then I think we need to understand about what we're gonna do about security. How are we gonna seal that thing up so that people aren't breaking in there and living in there? Cause it wouldn't take much for some homeless guy to go in there, or gal, or whatever, to go in there and decide they aren't warm enough and start a fire in the middle of that floor, and next thing you know, it's gone. So I think there are a couple more things that staff needs to work out with this stakeholders group about, you know, what costs are gonna be, you know, are there gonna be increased insurance costs? What are they gonna do about security of the building? Those kinds of things before you know, like I said, I'm not opposed to turning the power on. I just think we need to answer all the questions before we do it.
We also, we have representatives from the stakeholders group. I realize you typically don't take public comment during conversations in work session, but if you want to hear from them directly as far as anything in relation to the conversation.
I'd be willing to listen to one.
One from each group.
What do you mean each group?
He just
How many
told you which
stakeholders?
2 groups are out there.
We have a core group of individuals, the stakeholder group that we've been meeting with, Denise McGriff.
Like I said, a core group of stakeholders, so I'd be willing to
Correct.
listen to a representative from the stakeholders group.
So I'd say Denise McGriff or Todd Island or Bill Daniels have been.
Rod and I.
Okay.
One.
Well, I don't have the architectural information, he does.
You know,
Point of order.
hold on a second. So the point is A, we don't normally take testimony or.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
When you say we, who has control of who speaks to this body?
The mayor has control of the meeting.
Complete control of.
And the policy, the written policy of the commission is that we don't take public testimony at work sessions. So I'm just following the rules. And the fact is I don't think the architectural information is germane to the conversation that we're having now, because that's gonna be part of the conversation moving forward as far as whether or what the costs are gonna be. This is merely about, at least in my mind, it's merely about turning the power back on. Mr. Smith.
I agree, that's a question to be decided tonight.
I just would say that if we are, as a commission, really wanting to understand the question of where we go, I mean, obviously, we're not gonna answer all this tonight, but if there's representatives that are here from the Parks Foundation, I think that is, you know, should also be heard from, because they're, you know, an advisory group that we should be listening to, that care about our parks, that we really should be concerned about. If they're here wanting to talk about this, it's pretty clear that they think this is important.
So let's be clear though, okay, the Parks Foundation is not an advisory board of the city commission. The Parks
I
Advisory
didn't
Board
mean
is,
in that manner.
okay, I'm just saying. And,
Any group in this city we should be hearing from,
and when we have that discussion, when it's time to have that discussion about the architecturals and whether to save the house or how to save the house, if that's what we want to do, we can have those discussions now. What I understood the meeting to be about tonight was, most importantly, whether we're going to turn the power back on.
That's the question I believe we're here to decide.
Yeah, and I think it would be good to talk to hear from limited testimony from the group who's going to lead that charge and what their plans are. What do they get out of turning the power on? Are they committed to, you know, their
And
stance
like I said,
regarding
I'm happy to
that?
have one person come up and talk about it.
Yep.
So, who's it gonna be?
It's gonna be me.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I'd like the people who are here today in support of the Buena Vista Club, and it's Buena Vista, not Buena Vista, who are friends that we formed a group called the Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse. So could you just please raise your hand so that they know you are here? So thank you. There are several other people who are not able to be here tonight, members of the PRAC and a couple of other private citizens. My name is Denise McGriff and I live in Oregon City. And I have been working with Phil since the day he arrived for his job on the process to save the Buena Vista Clubhouse. And the reason that we feel that this property is important, I will reiterate what Commissioner Smith, Rocky Smith said. I don't want to repeat it all, but he is correct. And we have been doing a lot of research. Our goal tonight is to get the building stabilized, get the heat turned on, and get some minimal security. Right now, the security that is on the building is a light that I'd have to be sitting in your lap, Dan, for it to turn on. It's completely inadequate. We have a number of people who live adjacent to the building who are keeping an eye on it. They've been calling Parks. Jonathan's been coming over and checking on it. So that has been very helpful. We have people in the community who are concerned about the building. The thing is that we want the opportunity, after the building is stabilized, to initiate a community process about what we can do with this building. I think the information that you received about its use is not complete, because when I started at the city in 1988, we had all of the comprehensive plan meetings at the Buena Vista Clubhouse building. The Buena Vista neighborhood also met there on a regular basis when they were still active. So the building has had a lot of use. We have a person sitting in the audience who got married in the building, and that was the last time I was there for a public event, but yoga classes were occurring there, Boy Scout groups, as you said, AA meetings, Girl Scout troops. It was used quite a bit. And people used it during the summer for picnics and family events and all sorts of other things. It was never really truly advertised, I think, the way that it should have been. And I remember when it came off the list of buildings that you could lease, that was kind of our first inkling. Phil alluded to the stakeholder group that we met for, how long did we meet for that? Like 2 or 3 months maybe, I think. And we asked Mike Roberts to research the records to find out why it was red tagged. There was no record in his files that he could find as to why the building was red tagged. So we still don't know the answer to that question. Maybe only Scott Archer knows the answer to that question, but he's not here anymore. I think as part of our group, we would not have a problem with paying the electrical bill. It's been estimated it would be somewhere between $36 and $40. And if the group decides that that's not something I want to do, I will personally take on that responsibility myself. But we think that the bid of $4,900 is reasonable. The building will at least have some heat and security that's better than what's there now, and it will protect the city's asset. We think it's an asset. We also plan to move forward with getting it designated. Christina Robertson Gardner has all of our research. She sent that off to SHPO, as Commissioner Smith alluded. They have determined that it is definitely eligible for the National Register. We will apply for that and move that through the Historic Review Board, because once we get that status, we can then apply for grants that are not required to be matched, but we can bring some money to the table that is not going to cost the city money. So we've already started meeting. We have a meeting on Friday that we are going to initiate some of this work and get going. We also plan to put together sort of an outline, not super detailed, but just bullet points on where we think this needs to go. And we will be more than willing to share that with Phil. He's been working with us, and we're just trying to help him. We know that we have a lot of deferred maintenance in the city. This is just one piece of that puzzle, but we care enough about it that we're moving forward with that.
So are you committed to saying that you're not going to ask for any city funds to do the restoration of this building?
I'm not saying that right now,
Once
because
it's on the national-
we don't know the answer to that question. There are resources that can be brought to bear when it has a little bit more status. See, I always thought it was designated. Believe me, when I worked for the city, if I had known it was not designated, we would have gotten it done. But we just assumed it was. And then to come to find out that it wasn't was a little bit of a shock, because I said, well, if we didn't designate that, what else is out there that we didn't do on our last windshield survey in 2002 when our neighborhood was resurveyed? And so I know that for a fact, because I was participating with staff in helping them identify things that we weren't sure we had listed. So we will put together, as I said, just a brief outline of where we'd like to go. It may not be fully fleshed out, Rachel, but we will try to put something together. We've already kind of got that. We've created a little charter to create it's a long acronym, but Friends of the Buena Vista Clubhouse, so FBVCH is where we're kind of going there now. So any other questions? I said, we're just trying to take this one step. We can't really do much more until we know that the building is at least stable. 4 years, I have been working on this personally, and so have all the other people behind me.
So I think, I would like staff to go back and determine what any other costs might be for turning the power back on, doing security, insurance, whatever they are, and then bring it to us at a future city commission meeting to make an actual decision.
Including, so what I heard was,
The only decision we're gonna make at a future meeting for right now is going to be just turning the power back on and whatever additional costs.
okay, so what I had heard was, what we can work on is putting power back on, affect the insurance rate. You know, what would be additional security costs potentially? We can meet with, Ms. McGriff and her group as it relates to the timeline for raising money, which you've kind of talked about. You have some outline that we can include in that. I would assume you'd like to see that, but really focusing on those two main issues about what the total costs are for bringing power to the facility, and then put that on a regular commission meeting.
So who is pursuing the National Register? The city or this
We
group?
would be pursuing that.
So there's, and
Is there
Denise.
not a letter already issued by Chip about
There's a
its
letter.
cultural value?
Yeah,
It's
it's eligible.
it's a determination letter, so you have two processes. One, you have the National Register of Historic Places, which, if I'm correct, anybody could nominate public facilities for
Yes.
without consent of the public facility. It's a non-regulatory designation, but it does open up grant opportunities and funding
Absolutely.
opportunities versus we have in 1742 of the municipal code our historic, so that's a local designation, which is where the landmark designation would come in, and the historic review board requirements and guidelines. So one's regulatory and one is, I'm not sure, what would you call the register? It's an acknowledgement of the historic
Yes,
resource.
it's an acknowledgement of the resource and whatever its significance is to the local community. And in this case, we have sort of all three. We have local, we have a state significance, and we have some national significance. And it all plays in there. They all kind of stack up with each other.
But it's non-binding on the city,
The National Register.
the national one that they are pursuing.
Correct, it's
Well,
a non-regulatory.
That is one of the things that we've talked about that we would like to pursue, since we do have a letter of determination. And that's, again, that's something, I mean, we know that SHPO would support that, or excuse me, State Historic Preservation Office, I don't want to use too many initials, that they would support it because they've already given us that indication.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Good work.
So I guess to get to your point, Rachel, I would be very hesitant to designate this in our local ordinances because that does trigger some requirements for us.
Right, that's why I was wondering, is like if things were being pursued that would trigger requirements of the city if we were, but thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to have to take care of your own building.
Come on.
Just saying.
You neglected it just as much as anybody
I
else.
was working on another one, sir.
So we're moving
Can
on.
only tackle so much.
On 19-179, Clackamas Park Master Plan Scope, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commission. At the recent goal-setting retreat for the City Commission, we discussed goals for this upcoming biennium. One of those goals was a continuation of a current goal of the Clackamas Park Master Plan. During that conversation with the Commission, it was asked to bring forward additional information to initiate a conversation at a future work session, which is what we'll be presenting tonight in regards to the master plan for Clackamas Park. So a little overview. Again, this is the commission goal. So revisit a portion of the waterfront master plan, which was a plan put together in 2004 that looked at the broader waterfront areas. One portion of that was Clackamas Park. So what we were proposing is to look at Clackamas Park, the boat ramp location, the RV park, and the city-owned properties across from Clackamas Park, which are currently used as overflow parking. Overview of Clackamas Park there in yellow. The three focus areas, again, the boat ramp, which is currently located on the Clackamas River side of the park, the overflow parking area, which is adjacent to the McDonald's property across the street from the park, and then the RV park, which is along the Willamette River there in the central portion of the park. Clackamas Park is one of our charter parks. It's also differentiated from our other parks in that it's our only designated regional park. So we see a lot of use both locally for events and activities, picnicking. It's our only skate park in the city, as well as regionally, primarily for the boating and the RV park use. So one of the questions that we need to look at, again, is the boat ramp. So how can we best incorporate the boat ramp into the overall design of the park in order to serve all users? So one of the comments that we received back from the commission and that we've received from community members in general is that the recommended move of the current boat ramp 350 feet downriver on the Clackamas would take up a substantial portion of the green space in the park. You know, obviously it's a regional park and something that we need to accommodate all users, not just boaters. As we went through the process, they did a hydrological study on the flow of the river and determined that the river will continue to move and its current location would not be the best location long term, and that it would need to be moved downriver in order to avoid being damaged in future high water events and just general use. So during that conversation, they had an engagement process with the general community. Additionally, they worked with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Oregon State Marine Board to review the plans. They had engineers look at how it was laid out, the water rise and fall, and the shifting river. During that, they looked at a couple of different options. So the image that you're looking at here will identify, and I apologize, I don't have the clicker in front of me, but using the, Katie, help, Claudia, would you mind, thank you. I don't know where the, thank you, sorry, I can't find the, oh, there it is. Okay, so we have here the current boat ramp location. They're proposing moving it again approximately 350 feet downriver to the proposed boat ramp location. We currently have a parking lot in this area and restroom facilities down here. The proposal looked at two options originally and then came back with a third and fourth option. The third option called for angling of the boat ramp in order to allow the flow of the river to bypass as opposed to undercut the ramp. Additionally, they call for a little bit of a smaller footprint. The last option that they looked at, option 4, was the preferred option by the Oregon State Marine Board due to safety concerns with the pull in, pull out, and backing up of trailers. They asked for.
When was the last time we had an accident at the boat ramp?
We have minor accidents fairly often.
Well, yeah.
But we don't.
People getting back up.
Yeah.
We do find debris.
Operator error versus design.
Design.
Correct. So we do find remnants of accidents frequently, but it's usually, the tail lights, things like that that are.
So let me ask you a question, Phil.
Yes, sir.
We got a letter from Commissioner Shaw that seemed to make a lot of sense to me. That why couldn't we move that boat ramp from here down to just about where the start of that tree line is, angle it like we were talking about. You don't have to add all this other parking and stuff. You angle it the way we're talking about this one so it doesn't undercut. and you leave the old boat ramp there for, you know, kayakers and people that don't need to have a mechanical way to get stuff in the water, and we eliminate all that footprint that's going into the main green space in the park.
One of the concerns is that the temporary repair that was done on the current boat ramp is the cost estimations were to reuse some of those materials. And so the current ramp would need to be reused. I mean, we could always look at the additional cost associated with.
Well, I don't think technically you don't even need a ramp, you just need the space for people to carry their kayaks or whatever down. It doesn't need to have to be a paved thing.
Yeah.
So you could take the material out of there that you wanted to use and reuse it somewhere else and just have a space there, whether it's gravel or sand or whatever, so that, you know, other users that aren't needing a ramp can use the thing. And, you know, what you're hearing from me and Commissioner Smith and commissioners prior to that is that putting this giant facility in the middle of this park is pretty much a no-go. Commissioner O'Donnell.
So, you know, I spent a lot of time walking this thing, and I walked with Jerry Herman. And I'll tell you what, I've looked at these 4 plans, and if I was being kind to them, I'd say they were uninspired. And I can't be that kind, because whoever drew these has never operated a boat in a flow in a river in his life. And I look at it, and the current ramp is sideways to the water, perpendicular. That's the greatest resistance that ramp will ever feel. Why would you want to do that? And I've launched boats, and I've spent a lot of time on rivers. I'll give you a perfect example of my thought, and I walked with Mr. Herman, and he may have ideas on this and on possible alternate funding, because I feel like the state is telling me, if you want my money, do it this way. And I'm saying, keep your money because your idea sucks. It's a terrible idea.
How do you really feel, Frank?
That's how I feel. And I'll tell you what, if you go to Woodland, Washington, there's a river called the North Fork of the Lewis, and you go up to the island ramp, and there's a ramp that's cut in almost parallel to the flow of the stream. It's been there for 50 years because I've launched on it for 50 years. And it stands no matter flood conditions or whatever. And that's not even a consideration. And I felt like to minimize the impact on this fine park and keep the footprint as it is, it's as simple as putting in an angular ramp, and instead of the entryway now, which is you enter and come around counterclockwise, enter, pull up, back your boat down, drop it, and pull out clockwise. So, you know, I want to consider the impact on the park. I'd like to hear if anyone is aware of any alternate funding that's available. Plans 1 through 4, there's not a good plan among them. So that's my straight shot on what I think about this plan.
Commissioner Smith?
I'm not gonna be as nice.
Not as nice as that.
The thing that bothers me about that, and I agree with everything that has just been said, what bothers me is the last time I had this conversation was 2015-16, okay, where we very clearly said all these plans suck, and we're looking at the same plans.
Yeah.
So what has changed? The staff knows this for the last 3 or 4 years that this is not going to work. And if you look at these maps, these are not new concepts. They're 2015. This is what we looked at the last time when we said no. So what have we done since?
I think that's a question to you guys,
Commissioner
right?
Smith?
Right, well, this was a goal that we didn't get to in the last biennium. We proposed it for the new biennium, and during the goal-setting retreat, we were asked to bring this back before we put the RFP out to begin the work. So that's why we're here tonight.
We're not
We
there
fully
anymore.
understand what the concerns are that have been raised by the commission, but we need to start the process
I'd
in
like
order
to
to start
know,
addressing some of these questions and concerns on what, do we want a boat ramp there or not? If we do, how are we gonna do it? And if we don't wanna do what the state does, are we willing to find other funding? I mean, those are all questions that we need to work through, but we were asked to come to you before we started that process. and
I
that's
would
what we're
like to
doing.
know, talking with the state, if we could do what Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Shaw and I have suggested, which is moving the ramp so that it's angled about the same angle as we're talking about in this picture that we're looking at now, but right at the end of that last section of gravel before we start to hit the trees, and make your entryway right there and maybe change the circulation. I don't know. I don't do all that much boating, so, you know, I'll leave it to experts like Commissioner O'Donnell as far as that's concerned. But I would like to ask the State Marine Board if that would be an acceptable alternative to them.
I will say I've had conversations with the State Marine Board in regards to the position of the boat ramp, their concerns and the concerns that are outlined by their hydrologist is that there's a sandbar in the middle of the river that will continue to build up and kind of shift down river. And so in this general area, that was why they proposed moving it down approximately 350 feet to maintain usability in a longer period of time, as opposed to as the water level dips, the sandbar is there and it's more difficult for boaters. That is my understanding of the process. Again, this was, the hydrology study was done prior to my time with the city. The work that went into producing these materials was produced through a grant through the Oregon State Marine Board, as well as the repairs on the current ramp. It's my understanding that they would support these alternatives or slight modifications to these alternatives, but that substantially moving the ramp into a different area would require a wider conversation.
The current ramp can stay and be used as a breakwater to defend the lower ramp. And I'm not going to give a hydraulics lesson, but as velocity of the stream decreases, debris gets dumped. So they're just saying move it further down and the debris gets dumped before it gets to the boat ramp.
For what?
For a while. For a while.
So are we not allowed to dredge anymore for navigational purposes? I mean, I can't believe that there's a whole lot of fish habitat going on right there.
I wouldn't be able to answer that question at this time.
I just think there's a better solution. This is our backyard.
Commissioner Lousmith, have you got anything?
Well, I'm actually wondering, so how much money are we talking about coming from the state versus doing it on our own? That was mentioned by somebody up here.
The cost estimates for these were anywhere in the 900,000 to 1 million range. It was a couple of years ago, and with construction cost estimates.
But that also
I'm
includes
be a little more than that.
all of this other construction in the park.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we were just to move it to the end of, right at the edge of the driveway or the parking lot that we currently have, all of this other construction goes away.
Right, so, but are we getting money from the state if we use their design?
Only if
Yeah.
we use their plan.
Correct. Yeah, they're not comfortable. I mean, we could do additional study and we could go back to them with additional documentation, which we would have to fund solely on behalf of the city, and it could be reevaluated by the state. But at this point, they used funds to do a study. They brought in engineers to evaluate, and this is plus or minus, and some tweaking obviously can occur, but these are the options that they want us to look at.
Were
what
they
they're
told?
recommending.
Were they told about the concerns that the commission had about this massive construction inside the green area of the park?
I believe they came and presented.
Yeah, they presented an open house, which the public was welcome to attend, and it's my understanding, it was prior to my time with the city, but it's my understanding that members of the public did voice their concerns, and that the state was very firm in their understanding that this would be the best approach.
So how much was the cost of this design study? You said it was paid for by a Marine Board grant.
That I do not have. I know that I can get that to you, but the repair work that was completed, I think was in the, for the fix was in the $160,000, $170,000 range. The engineering study, I would imagine it would be,
So what I'm getting at, so if we want to come up with, if we would like a different design and we would have to do our own study in order to get to that point anyway, where we could
Correct.
possibly take a redesign back to the state and ask if they would consider our proposal. So I guess I would be interested in knowing, is that really a question for us is, you know, how much would it cost in order to do that work? Cause I don't think anybody up here is gonna agree with these design drawings, so is that another alternative?
We can research what that cost would be and get back with you.
Are you aware of any other sources of funding?
There are grant opportunities, you know, typically I would imagine what they would look for in those grant opportunities is, you know, support of, you know, the state and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon State Marine Board. But there are grant opportunities available that might be taken away from other projects that we would be applying for.
So let me ask one more question. Nobody's telling we have to remove the current ramp, right?
No, but there's a $50,000 credit.
At this time, no. But at this time, no. The
Okay, so let me
state,
ask you a question. Why couldn't we build a breakwater?
That is the, yeah.
No, I'm saying move upstream, you know, or upstream maybe 50 yards and put an angled breakwater in right at the edge. It sends it out, you know, 15, 20 feet.
Like here.
Somewhere like right in here, you know, a little wall that's strong enough to, you know, take the water flow, and then we fix the ramp and it's still there and we aren't spending a ton of money.
I don't know the answer to that because I don't know about navigable streams or Andromeda's fish migrations and those things.
I'm just asking the question.
I
I'm
know,
not saying.
I'm with you there.
yeah, I don't have an educated answer
I
on
think
that.
there's no bad,
Well, I think you have the answer to your question. That is none of these plans are acceptable, and you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how we go about it, or if we just say we're just going to leave the boat ramp the way it is, and we'll deal with it another time.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to destroy, you know, 50% of the green space in this park for boat traffic. And while I realize that boat traffic is extremely important in certain times of the year for our economy, and it's a traditional thing, at the same time, I don't think we have, you know, I just can't see us, you know, destroying Clackamas Park to the level of this to put in a boat ramp.
and I believe there's a private group, I think Mr. Herman's group has looked at this and has probably some valuable information that can be shared with staff. Potentially alternative funding. And
Let's not have a conversation on another.
I understand, but and I also recognize that this is not the only question to be asked about
Right.
this park tonight.
Right.
Commissioner Smith, you have something else?
Well, maybe I can wait till later. I guess when we put in the work at John Storm, that ramp, it's now a double ramp, which I think added capacity than what we had there in the beginning. So I know we don't take really track of numbers, but you know, if we ever get to the point that we have to ask the question, are we building it or is the state building it? We really need to know, do we need it? And we don't really know that.
Because Sportcraft is still launching, right?
Correct.
And it's now, you know.
And John Storm, you can launch it at Storm, is it big enough to take
It's just a
a?
question, and I'm not saying we wanna get rid of a boat ramp there, but
Sure.
we need to look at the numbers, see how much is it used, is it sitting, you know?
Okay, is there any further discussion on this topic? What?
No,
Commissioner
I
Blythe-Smith.
think there's more, you have more, right?
Yeah, we have a couple more slides,
The others.
just talking to the overall questions that we would be asking going through the master planning process. We do understand that this is a concern of the commission, it's a concern of PrAC, it's a concern of the general public, and something that we will incorporate into the broader conversation as to what to use Clackamas Park for. The other pieces that we will be discussing as part of the master planning process is the RV park location. It floods regularly. Typically, we have to close it down between November and April because of high water events and the threat of high water events. We have attempted to keep it open during the winter time and often have to close it, reopen. So the last couple of seasons, we've closed it during late November, early December through April.
What are the costs to reopen?
It's a lot of staff time.
So all the electrical plumbing stuff is all able to be completely cut off so that it doesn't get wet when it
Correct.
floods?
Yeah, it's able to get disconnected for regular
Well,
high water events.
disconnected is different than waterproof.
It is waterproofed and able to be waterproofed appropriately for typical high water
All right.
events. Questions, again, should we be in the RV park business? A general, broader question is that the highest and best use for our riverfront property? Is it located in the appropriate location? Again, going through flooding events regularly. A little information on the Clackamas RV Park, just over 2 acres, 38 spaces. Revenue for last year, $137,000. Expenses, again, this is direct costs only. We have volunteer park hosts. Does not include any staff time for supervision, training, all of those other things that come around with having volunteers on site.
So we make approximately 100 grand a year.
Right now, yeah.
If you look at that, it looks like a going concern. I'd bring in 3 times what it cost me to operate.
Yeah. So again, broader question would be, is that the highest and best use? It's a very personal use of a key asset in our park system, riverfront property. Could we use it for a broader, wider use? Could we utilize
Such as?
It's obviously in the floodplain, right?
Exactly. Picnicking facilities, should we expand the playground areas? Be able to utilize the park in a different way. And again, just questions for general community. We also have the overflow parking lot. Is this the best use of the city-owned properties? How do we better incorporate these lots into the park? We currently have no pedestrian, designated pedestrian crossing between the park and the overflow parking areas. We have approximately half of the acreage is covered with the parking lot. The rest is green space, but not necessarily designated as green space. How do we, do we flip the RV park over to the overflow parking area and then open up the river frontage for different use? They're approximately the same size, and could be something that we would have an RV park that's above the high water mark. We could keep open year round as opposed to only seasonally.
So this is not technically part of Clackamas Park at this point in time?
It's not property that we consider part of Clackamas Park. It is the overflow parking lots. I will say that there is a deed restriction that the properties be used for park purposes or sewer purposes.
So why were we trying to sell it earlier if that had those restrictions on it?
That was one of the reasons we pulled it.
That's not true.
What?
It was pulled because the commission asked them. We never knew any of that stuff, and why wouldn't that have been known when we put for sale signs up on it?
Yeah, I personally
true.
wasn't aware that there was a deed restriction as far as
Jeez.
park use. I knew there was a deed restriction as far as the sewer plant.
So you're saying that piece of property is above the high water mark?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It almost never floods past, back in here somewhere.
Doesn't go over the road. Doesn't go over.
For the
Not there.
the
Not there.
ordinary high water mark.
Sometimes it'll go across the road between the new apartments and the cove.
So again, the 3 major components of the master plan, looking at the RV park, the overflow parking areas, and the boat ramp, looking to engage the community in a broader conversation. Would take, again, anywhere between 9 months and a year to go through a planning process, engaging all of the stakeholders, reaching back out to the Oregon State Marine Board, determining what level they would support, making alterations to their recommendation, and initiating that conversation with all users.
This makes my head hurt.
Me too.
How many times have we done this?
Way too many.
What I want to understand is, how do we fix the boat ramps? Throw all those plans out. They aren't going to work. You're not going to get 3 votes up here to rip up the interior of Clackamas Park. So get with the State Marine Board and say, okay, my electeds aren't going to let us do this. So look at the plan. Tell us what we can do. That shouldn't take a year. And then, maybe a little bit of this other stuff, but a year and then another consultant and another thing for us to end up right back here in the same situation we've been in for the last 30 years. I cut myself.
I appreciate your concerns. Again, it's transparency. This is the part that's really important to many stakeholders, many users in our community, and it's water frontage, so making sure that we're doing it in the appropriate way.
I get it, but you know, transparency is, you know, one of those buzzwords. We are as transparent as any elected body anywhere in the state of Oregon. We don't hold on to public records requests. We don't tell people they can't come to meetings. We broadcast every single meeting that we have that has any quasi-judicial abilities. There comes a limit to the amount of transparency I'm willing to have as far as going through another process that we've already been through at least 3 times since I can remember being involved, and it's probably been more than that. So let's whittle it down to the last, 2 inches instead of going through the 6 miles that we've already been through before, and get something back to us that we can consider. You both now understand what is not acceptable, so find something that is.
I understand. So if you don't want us to look at the RV park in these 2 properties, we'll be happy not to. We're struggling with what would you like us to do with these properties because there is not consensus.
I think the mayor was talking about the boat ramp.
Well, I understand, but it's, we were trying to package this into
Right.
one
No,
because I think
and I don't have a problem with that, all right? And it shouldn't take a lot of analysis either on the RV park or this other property about what it is that we might be able to use those things for. I personally think that if we, like Commissioner O'Donnell said, the RV park is pretty popular. It's making money. It's not costing us money. I assume you're paying your close up and restart costs in that $47,000 or whatever it is.
Correct.
So, it's actually a revenue generator. And then, I guess the other thing would be to have a discussion about what to do with those other 2 properties. But as far as the boat ramp itself is concerned, I think it's pretty clear that we're not gonna let anybody go into the interior of Clackamas Park with a whole bunch more roads. Does anybody disagree with me there?
Not a bit, and given the restrictions on these lots here, I mean, what
Do we
can
know
do?
that?
Well, if it's,
Yes.
if it's a true deed restriction, yeah, it's there.
So why aren't we seeing that tonight? So we've been on the commission for so long, I've been part of discussions about selling the property, not selling the property, and we just now know this? I mean, we had the same situation on the lot on downtown Oregon City where we put it up for sale and then we didn't realize that half the lot was Singer Hill. I mean, we've done this so many times. It's so frustrating.
Okay. I understand your frustration, but I also.
So why wouldn't we have seen that document tonight
I
if
also
that
don't
was part
wanna
of?
beat up on staff,
Well-
okay? So, I guess the other question would be, is there a procedure, because there's always a procedure for something, is there a procedure to have either one of those deed restrictions removed?
I believe that we kept those from the county. I think it was a county deed restriction from Clackamas County. I would imagine, I'd have to talk to the attorney
So we
and
could theoretically
request them.
petition the board to remove that deed restriction?
I would think so, since the deed restriction came from them.
That's the
part of
sewer
this.
one, right?
Right, that's sewer, when you said there
But
was.
you said there was a park.
I believe that that it was all part of one decision. So this is where the Oregon City Sewer Treatment Facility was.
Right.
And when it was consolidated into Water Environmental Services, and I don't have the whole history here, we can pull the deed and try and see why the deed restriction was put on there, but I believe it was in lieu of, was that it would be used for a park purpose, is what the deed restriction includes language alluding to, so.
Well, if it's problem in the county, it can be taken off by the county. So, I think that's something that, let me have a conversation with the politicians at the county and see if there is any, possible interest in working with the city as far as removing that deed restriction.
It was also used by the fire department. That white square that you see is the tower for the fire
I
department
remember
training.
that now, yeah.
So that we used it for other things other than that.
So, what we've heard is that, I guess I'm trying to figure out, would you like a public process on these questions that are out there, or would you like staff to just work and bring back things that the commission can consider?
At this point, I think we've had public process beyond public process. Go look at this stuff and bring us back some options. That's my opinion. I don't know, but.
Tell us what are the actual deed restrictions on there, black and white. What does it say we can do, what can't we do? That tells us what we could possibly use it for. And to answer the mayor's question, can those restrictions be removed?
And
If
I'll
not,
do the research on that.
okay, the other question is that RV lot that we rent, is it frequently at capacity?
Yes,
Certain months.
during the summer season, frequently between
Okay,
late May and
well, that's a
And if we
consideration.
Early
were, and if we
September.
were open now, if it was open now, because it's the start of salmon season, it would be full now.
Well, I was just thinking about these other lots, maybe, maybe they're less desirable, but maybe they would fill too. Maybe the thing becomes an incredible revenue generator. It's already paying back 3 to 1.
Well, remember that the waterproofing and electrical stuff that's there wasn't always like that. There was a time that, so we at one point made a decision that yes, we want to keep the RV park, and that's why we want to make sure that electrical is taken care of so that every season we can take it back off and whatever. We also started building areas in there that fit the master plan. So the students at the high school built a kiosk there for the entranceway to Clackamas Park, which was supposed to be tourism information, and they never put the signs up. They never they never finished that part of that project. Yes, we've been through this so many times. We've made decisions on these things so many times, and we're still sitting here.
Clear as mud?
we can bring back information to the commission and we'll do research on those areas.
Take a couple of months and bring it back.
Yeah, and I will say one of the concerns with the current electrical setup at the current location is not to the level that RVs typically like to see. It's under-serviced as far as the amperage, and I'm sure the mayor can probably tell me a little bit more about that, but we frequently have electrical work that's required from fuses blowing
Well then,
circuit.
but along with that, bring us back the number it's gonna take to upgrade the electrical.
So that's what the broader conversation around whether or not you want to move it out of the water area that floods regularly, if we should move it up into the overflow parking area, make site improvements on the main portion of the park.
But I think that's something that we can bring back with more detail as to what
Yeah.
the deficiencies of that facility are,
Yeah.
and what would be needed to
Sure.
make it an actual up-to-date RV park.
Just understand that there is also the question about, okay, if we take these two parcels and put something else there instead of overflow parking, you're still gonna need some overflow parking somewhere. So are you gonna put that down where the RV park is? Because that pretty much, that takes care of all your quote waterfront amenity if you put a parking lot down there. So there are some other considerations. If we're gonna continue to have a boat ramp, we have to have the parking capabilities for the guys that are doing salmon and sea lice fishing.
Agreed.
It's just that simple.
So it sounds like you were essentially proposing to do a master plan update to answer all of these questions
With public involvement.
with public involvement. Okay. But we already have a master plan though.
Yeah, master plan after master plan after master plan.
It was. There's a conceptual master plan that looked at the broader waterfront. This would be a specific plan to look at Clackamas Park.
We've probably got enough master plans, you could use it as a foundation for one corner of the Buena Vista house.
Or a boat ramp.
All right, are you guys clear?
Yep.
Anything else?
Can I just give a couple brief, quick updates real
Quick.
quick? Metro Parks and Nature Bond Committee Open House, Tuesday, March 19th, 5:30 to 7:30, 5:30 PM to 7:30 at the Three Rivers VFW at 104 South Tumwater. Discuss the new nature park at Mill Creek Canyon, Atlantic Falls Legacy Project Riverwalk, and improvements to Kenema Bluff. We also have the Malala Avenue Streetscape Project Open House on Wednesday, March 20th, 5 PM to 7 PM at the Future Public Works Facility, which is at 13895 First Street. And just an update that beginning this week, ODOT will be doing some nighttime and daytime lane closures on 99E for the tunnel illumination construction project, single lane closures with flaggers. Expect closures during the following times, Monday through Thursday night, 7 PM to 6 AM, Friday night, 7 PM to 9 AM, Saturday nights from 6 PM to 10 AM, and Sunday nights from 6 PM to 6 AM. And then we will see some nighttime noise south of the tunnel as a result of drilling. The 24-hour nuisance hotline is 503-412-2379. So those are all the updates that I have tonight.
Anything else from anybody? We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.